Hello everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining me this afternoon, May 25th, 2021. Almost a quarter century into the para-Gregorian millennium. But of course, time isn't like our clocks or calendars, our months, or ways of counting. All the frameworks we use don't connect us much at all to time. In fact, they largely disconnect us from the old senses that most of nature still has, and our people once had. And perhaps some of our people still have. The time senses. To know what time it is more than a number. It's to know something of the spirit of the moment, the recent past, the long past, the near-term future, the long future. All the living beings, every plant and insect and animal here, they are making unique forms of time. And not just by class. This is a dandelion, that's a salvia. Here's some sweetgrass, there's a fir tree, here's the ant, here are some ants, there are the birds, the chickadee, the towhee, finch, falcon. Not just by class, each one and the way it's in the web of relationships over those same aspects of time. Because none of these ones is a one alone. None of them are ones alone. All of them are ones together with other beings in time. And so they make time together, even though our mind or our thinking can distinguish one of these plants or insects or animals. None of them are alone. Oh, there are various kinds of being alone, different degrees of it. But all of those kinds of being alone are other kinds of being together. And so to know what time it is means to know the intimate flavor, the intimate scent, the intimate essence of moments in relation with all other beings, with all the beings of this world, with all the beings of this place I'm in, with these beings right next to me here now. There are like a spiral scope of temporalities from all beings in all of time to some beings in some of time to these beings in this time with me. And we're trained to think very differently from this. We're trained to think that to know what time it is to know what the watch says, to know what the date is, to know what the month is, what the year is. But those confusing artifacts of our ongoing numerical addictions, our analytical addictions, our addictions to normalization, to routinizing, to functions, to algorithms, all these things, they made a mess of time for us, for they made us think that time was numbers. And whatever it might be, it isn't numbers. And temperature has something to do with it, too. But each of the living beings here is making a unique form of time as its own body and contributing to countless relational temporalities throughout all of time-space. The mysteries of time are some of the most astonishing, most beautiful, most inspiring that we can encounter if we can step aside from all of the frames and numbers that we've made and into the thing itself. Of course, it is no thing. Into the flows and natures and spirits of time. Stepping into them. Not merely in our imagination. Of course, we are doing the same thing. Each of your organs is a different kind of time. Each of your cells is a different kind of time. All the cohorts of cells make unique forms of time. The signaling in your nervous system has layered temporalities. The function of your vision, it doesn't happen at a frequency, but there's something like pace, right? Something like pace associated with how vision resolves. The strike of a praying mantis is faster than signals our visual neurons can carry. I used to know the numbers. Now I just remember the principle. There are microseasons in each minute, in each hour, in each day, and minutes don't really exist except for clocks and those who watch them, nor do seconds. These are all inventions. I mean, even days are fuzzier than we imagine. They start and end with fuzzy edges. It's not an accident. The dawn and the twilight the between times. And all throughout the day and all throughout the night, everything is moving and changing. At many different rates. It's not that we should dispose entirely of the measuring aspects of time, but rather I think it's important that we recover what was lost when those became compelling to us. Now, when we began to believe in minutes and hours and clocks and such, days and calendars. Because that's where we began to lose the innate senses of time and temporality and tempo in relation, and the wonderful manifold of temporalities that is natural everywhere in nature except in our thought. From which apparently it's been largely evicted. All of us know the joy of having our sense of time disappear into bliss or play or ecstasy or wonder or exploring or adventure. And we know too the opposite, how time can become interminable in states of agony or injury or illness or pain. And we know also that dreams can happen in an instant, and yet seem to last for months or maybe even a lifetime. And from these things we know that time is not a static thing. It's not a linear situation, except when we relate with it that way. In other words, it's as if there's a specific kind of overlay, and this is really important, okay? So, as observers, we have the capacity to create analytical overlays, and usually these overlays are they divide things, and that's important. They cut things apart into classes and quantities. Categories, classes, quantities. And these seem very concrete, especially once we build machines to demonstrate and follow the principle and show us that a second is a second everywhere. Of course, there are exceptions, but most of them are somewhat exotic. And actually, if we get really picky, a second isn't a second everywhere. Every second's a unique second anywhere. But most people don't get that picky. Or many people don't. So, the concreteness of our systems of measurement and analysis is deceptive. We think, well, now that it's concrete, Surely we understand it. We know what it is, how to measure it, if it can be changed or not. If so, what changes it? If not, why not? Just like we know, for example, temperature, right? Temperature is a number. And we know hardness. We know it very physically, very concretely. So there's all these things that we've come to know pretty concretely. Time is not among the more concrete of them, but our systems of measurement are quite concrete and repeatable, reliable. They do the same thing every time we employ them. We trust them. And so there's a layer of human thought and social reality that deals with the stuff that's relatively concrete. And the danger is, and what often happens is, that the humans take that concreteness and think of it as the most authoritative truth. Right? That an hour is always an hour is a very authoritative truth, even if it's not universally authoritative. Right? That hard is hard and soft is soft. Physically, if we touch them, we try to change the rock, it doesn't change. We try to force the water into a shape, it dissolves. So the concreteness of reality, or rather the concreteness of the overlays we've made, is deceptive and comes to seem to us to be both authoritative and complete. The truest truth seems to be the concrete truths. And so all that is not concrete over time gets lost to our sensibility, to our imagination. We don't imagine it anymore. To our thought, we don't consider it anymore. To our concern, we have no sense of a reason to pay attention to things that in the concrete layer simply don't exist. But reality is not merely the concrete. Not by a long shot. The concrete is perhaps less than 1% of reality. And even if we look at space-time and we ask ourselves questions about scientific questions, clinical questions, about is there more mass or more emptiness, right? Is there more mass or more vacuum? Which takes up more space, planets or the context in which they float? Right? Whatever that context in which they float may be, and it's something very unlike what the humans are thinking, I promise you this. There's a lot more of that context than there is sort of the crystallized expressions of the character of that context that we call planets and stars and worlds and organisms and minds. So much more of the universe, that which is not concrete. And therefore the seeming authoritative extremity of our toy-like concrete systems is deceptive. In fact, without the non-concrete minds with which we consider and become confused by concrete phenomena? I never remember. Without those minds, those non-concrete minds, concreteness is useless. We wouldn't even be able to be deceived by it because there wouldn't be any awareness, consciousness, purpose, relation, orientation, perspective, curiosity, wonder, awe, reverence. Yeah, you know my list. So, as our species developed more and more abstract ideas and representations of phenomenon or phenomena, we lost touch with all that came before that in a way that resembles a person who awakens from a dream and then just stops dreaming forever after. I suggest that would be a really bad thing, though there might be some ways for our minds to accomplish some of the things that dreaming accomplishes without actually dreaming. Maybe. But we've been blinded by our analytic representations of things, and our awareness of the seeming objectivity of our concrete abstractions and ideas and concepts and measurings. It's kind of wrecked our mind because there were many other elements. Of course, who do I mean by our? Well, those of us who are thus deceived. Surely there are some who are less deceived and some who are more deceived by all of this. And it's not that we're deceived that I'm concerned about, it's that we're blinded. We lose faculties that are native to our human incarnation. Faculties that allow us to sense the character of time, the moment, a situation, each other, the future, the past. Faculties that allow us to share minds with other beings, living places, each other. And so, in a way, though we're profoundly endowed, most of us are really quite crippled. Even I myself, to some degree, am crippled in this way. Now there's some way to communicate this that will bring the lightning-like power of what I'm speaking around home to my listeners. And perhaps I can't quite grasp it. But most of how we're trained to think is derived from our ideas of stasis and concrete value, identity, position, temporality, quality, character, so on. And all of that stuff's quite compelling in its layer. This is why it seems authoritative. The tree was here yesterday. The tree will probably be here tomorrow, even if it's not exactly the same tree, and surely it couldn't be. Is it a process or a being, right? In English, most of the identities are conceived of as things. The tree is a thing. Some of us will learn to return some intelligence to that by understanding, the tree is a being. And some of us will return more understanding or more awareness, more degrees of liberty to the concept. Oh, the tree is a process. Oh, the tree is my friend. Oh, the tree is my heart. The tree is my love. The tree is my companion. The tree is probably the origin of my hands. The tree is one of a people or some peoples. And when you see that the idea that the tree is vegetation, that shun sound means process, right? The tree itself doesn't have that shun sound in it. Vegetation. The T-I-O-N sound. Or the A-T-I-O-N sound, or the T-A-T-I-O-N sound. Tree is a noun in English. And so it subconsciously has the category of a thing. And that by itself is almost deceptive enough to wreck a mind. In one sense, an aspect of the insight of Buddhism can be stated in a single way. That's very simple. All things and beings are processes that transform And after the ... goes some talk about what we can conceive of as a special kind of emptiness that we might also conceive of as pure undifferentiated potential. But the language will trap us no matter which way we try to walk in it. So ... instead. There are vast domains of sensing and identity that become immediately unavailable to us when we believe that things, identities, processes are static, local, individual things, processes, and so on. There's no individual thing. You'd have to have a universe with nothing else in it, and then just one being or one object in there. And even then, you'd have a universe with nothing else in it, so that universe and that thing would be incredibly intimately co-expressive of each other. And science, in many cases, tries to produce the semblance of this universe by isolating things. Once we can properly isolate them, then we can figure out the mechanics, and now the concreteness, that deeply reliable mechanical concreteness emerges to our awareness, and we forget about the minds that became interested in the question in the first place and their staggering non-concreteness. And we also forget and pretend that it didn't happen, that we didn't really do 70 different things to try to isolate a process or what, the target of our interest or question or concern. We forget that too. And we forget that the whole universe is involved in the experiment, and there's no way to separate the universe from the experiment. You see? So that concreteness is floating on multiple oceans of totally non-concrete awareness, minds, beings, time, space, light, stars, planets, living creatures, all these beings and layers together, and their invisible origins, that which they are expressions of, right? That which they are unique physicalizations of, temporalizations of, this kind of thing. Of course, we can remember. And return some degrees of liberty to our ordinary thought without going mad with wild speculation and such. Yeah? We don't see, the problem is we've been trained to be very fond of systems, of identification, classification, evaluation, thought, speech, accounting. And the systems are useful and we won't get rid of them, but we should awaken, if we can, from their hypnotic influence that denies us the senses that could determine what their useful scope is, right? That's what's important. Not how powerful a system is, but where does its power begin and end in our relationships with it, so that it doesn't just become universal. And this is the problem with the concrete in thinking and language for humans. It gets universalized. Then you start hearing nonsense like, minds are just computers, the universe is a simulation, and machines can be intelligent, and other ridiculous nonsense. Time is just the counting. It never was. In fact, no one could live in the counting. You can see that if all I can do is go 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's all I can do, like a clock, right? And I can't even say it. I just make mechanical motions, click, click, click. There's nowhere in there for a mind. There's nothing alive. There's no way to be alive in that. And so as our fascination with our systems and their mechanics became more and more compelling to our people over time, and became more and more entrenched in our rapidly declining social and relational experience, that accounting evicted all kinds of other features of our experience and our minds and our awareness, our consciousness. Until the world became a world of things that are not ours. Since they don't belong to us, they are uninteresting to us, and maybe even offensive to some. Because we formed minds in the image of a bizarre expression of the idea of counting, to the degree that most of the universe and reality in our minds didn't count anymore. The same way that when humans look at their hands, they count 5. Right? They don't count 6, 1 for the palm. They don't count 7, 1 for the wrist or 1 for the whole hand. They just count the count, of the members, right? As if they were separated. And while they are distinct, they are not separate. And this is how it is with the universe and time and the world and all these things. So we became so compelled by the idea of what counts and doesn't count, what shows up on the balance sheet and so on, that we completely, over time, this went on and is still going on. It's been going on for thousands of years, in different ways, in different places, and persons and peoples, but it's a lot of what's going on. And it's agony for a living being, because our actual interiority doesn't count. And so people want to dismiss it. And that which isn't concrete isn't countable. And so people want to dismiss it. And once we can count in time, all the uncountable forms of time don't count, therefore we can dismiss them. And do. But it's the uncountable forms of time that actually matter. The countable forms of time are useless to you. You can't live in them. They're empty and dead. They're ticks on a clock. They're numbers in an account. And so it's weird that the concreteness of things and their countability, places where we really cannot dwell, became the cognitive authorities over meaning and identity for many of us in many aspects of our thought, speech, experience, relationships, and so on. Everybody's counting things. Do you have enough of this? Do you not have enough of that? If you've got that thing I don't want, then I don't want that. If you've got that thing I do want, then boy, do I want that. But that's not relation. That's transaction. That's commerce. Now, it isn't that there's no commerce in relation, but not the formal kind. Once you get to the concrete kind, now it really just becomes a transaction. And again, a transaction has, it's not all bad, don't have to get rid of them, but it has insufficient dimensionality to be very habitable over time. And we lose senses, roles. We lose aspects of our own identity when we do this over and over again this way. Of all the mysteries, time is one of the most profound and deeply worthy of pursuit if one is curious. Because time is an idea that is folded into every other idea that humans have. If we get it wrong, all those ideas inherit and magnify the error, each in their own unique ways. If we can correct it even slightly, that correction is similarly inherited and magnified in all other concepts. Because without time, there are no concepts. There are no minds. Time is a fundamental root of meaning in human awareness, particularly conceptual awareness, but not merely conceptual awareness. It is one of the foundations of identity and value, and is even involved in how we get rid of it. It's even involved in the accounting and all of this stuff, right? Underneath the systems, the actual nature of time is bubbling and frothing and being unlike how we think, right? And then those systems are sort of floating up out of patterns in that bubbling and frothing that are reliably reproduced, that are reiterated, right? And so to heal our understandings of meaning and identity and to recover some of the faculties that are natural to our human incarnations, our human lives, we have to untrap time. Right? And if we can just learn a little bit more, reintroduce a bit more of this kind of dimensionality here and that kind there and this relational aspect here, then we will begin to see that not only is time not a trap, it's a network of transports that we are made to ride within, and that aspects of our being are intimate with and have been since the inception of our species, or rather, the dawn of the form of our species that is close enough to what we are today to be seen as the same by someone. analyzing it. Time is nothing like our models of it. And our models are blinding us to something so astonishing that there's no idea as astonishing. In fact, without time, there'd be no ideas. So, to whatever degree we can recover our awareness and our faculties, our temporal faculties, and our awareness of the complexity and living, pulsing nature of temporality, we will recover our intelligence. We will recover our humanity, our imaginations. And the chance to see beyond the cages that our modern societies and cultures so adeptly reimpose moment to moment and renew and invent and reiterate and recurse. A grand escape is my dear hope. And for that, we need each other. Thank you for joining me.